I consider myself primarily a performer, an entertainer, you know.
What Elvis Presley was to the 50s and the Beatles were to the 60s, John Denver was to the 70s.
My senses like a night in a
He sang from the heart, and everything that he sang about was a reflection of himself.
He had a special voice and a special gift.
like the mountains in springtime.
The mystery surrounding John Denver has finally been answered, and it's not a pleasant one.
In the rain, like a storm in the day.
Crash investigators are in Monterey County, California tonight, trying to determine the cause of an accident that killed John Denver.
Like a sleepy blue ocean. You feel
The country rock singer died after the experimental plane he was piloting crashed into the Pacific just after takeoff.
The suppression of a people, of a society, begins, in my mind, with the censorship of the written or spoken.
I hope that he wasn't scared, that it all happened pretty quickly for him.
For decades, she stayed quiet about one of the most famous love stories in music history. But now, Annie Denver is finally ready to tell her side of the story about her life with country music legend John Denver. What she reveals will change everything you thought you knew about the man behind songs like Rocky Mountain High and Country Roads. Annie Martell was just a young woman from a small town in Minnesota when she first met the man who would become one of America's most beloved singers. She had no idea that this meeting would lead to a love story that would inspire some of the most beautiful songs ever written. But she also had no idea about the heartbreak that would follow. Today, we're going to explore the untold story of Annie and John Denver's marriage. We'll discover how a ski lift ride led to one of the most romantic songs of all time, why their fairy tale marriage fell apart, and what Annie really thinks about the man who made her famous without her ever asking for it. John Denver wasn't always the superstar we remember today. When Annie first met him, he was just Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., a young man with big dreams and a guitar. He had grown up moving from place to place because his father was in the Air Force. This constant moving around made young John feel like he never really belonged anywhere. Maybe that's why he was always searching for home in his music. John discovered his love for music early. When he was just 11 years old, his grandmother gave him his first guitar. That simple gift changed everything. He spent hours learning to play, influenced by Elvis Presley and the folk music that was popular in the 1960s. By the time he got to college at Texas Tech University, music wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was his calling. After college, John made a big decision. He packed up everything and moved to Los Angeles to chase his dream of Biko. But it was Annie who inspired what many people consider John's most beautiful love song. Annie's song was written in just 10 minutes while John was riding a ski lift in Colorado. In that brief moment, high up on the mountain with the beautiful scenery all around him, John was able to capture everything he felt about his wife. The song talks about filling up his senses like a night in a forest, like a mountain in springtime. It was pure poetry, and it came straight from his heart. Annie later said that hearing that song for the first time was one of the most emotional moments of her life. Here was this man she loved, sharing his feelings about her with the whole world in the most beautiful way possible. The song became a huge hit, and suddenly Annie found herself famous too, whether she wanted to be or not. As John's career took off in the 1970s, everything changed for their family. John became a global superstar with hits like Take Me Home, Country Roads, Rocky Mountain High, and Sunshine on My Shoulders. His clear voice and acoustic guitar became known around the world. He wasn't just a musician anymore. He was appearing in movies and TV shows, and everyone wanted a piece of him. The success brought wonderful opportunities, but it also brought incredible pressure. John was traveling constantly, recording albums, giving concerts, and trying to keep up with the demands of being a superstar. Annie found herself dealing with a level of fame she never asked for, and watching her husband struggle under the weight of his success. During this time, John and Annie made the decision to grow their family through adoption. They welcomed 2 children into their home, a son named Zachary John and a daughter named Anna Kate. John often talked about how adopting these children felt like it was meant to be. He believed that Zachary and Anna Kate were destined to be part of their family. Being a father meant everything to John Denver. He once said something that showed just how important his children were to him. He said that the best thing about him was that he was somebody's dad. He said that when he died, being remembered as Zachary John and Anna Kate's father was more than enough for him. That quote really shows what mattered most to him, more than all the fame and success. John even wrote a song inspired by his son Zachary called "A Baby Just Like You." The song includes the touching words, "Merry Christmas, Little Zachary." Even though the song was originally written for Frank Sinatra, it clearly had deep personal meaning for John as a father. But despite all the love in their family, cracks were starting to show in John and Annie's marriage. The constant pressure of John's career was taking its toll. He was away from home more and more, dealing with the non-stop demands of being a celebrity. The man Annie had married, the struggling songwriter with big dreams, was becoming someone different under all that pressure and fame. In a 1983 interview, John was honest about what went wrong. He admitted that the non-stop demands of his work had driven a wedge between him and Annie. It became harder and harder to hold on to the closeness they once had. The success that was supposed to make their dreams come true was actually tearing their marriage apart. Annie later opened up about her side of the story too. She said that both she and John were too young and not mature enough to deal with the sudden changes that came with his incredible success. Imagine going from being a normal married couple to having your husband be one of the most famous people in the world. It's the kind of pressure that very few marriages can survive. The end of their marriage in 1982 was painful for both of them. There's one story that really shows how much pain they were both in. When they were dividing up their belongings during the divorce, John used a chainsaw to cut their bed in half. It was a dramatic and symbolic act that showed just how intense their separation was. It also showed a side of John's personality that could be impulsive and unpredictable when he was hurting. For Annie, the divorce meant losing not just her husband, but also her privacy. She had never asked to be famous, but because of Annie's song and her connection to John Denver, she would always be known as his first wife. The song that had once been such a beautiful expression of love now served as a permanent reminder of what they had lost. After the divorce, Annie largely stepped away from the public eye. She focused on raising their adopted children and building a life away from the spotlight. Meanwhile, John tried to find love again. In 1988, he married an Australian actress named Cassandra Delaney. They had a daughter together named Jessie Bell, but this marriage also ended in divorce in 1993. John was open about how painful his second marriage had been. He once said that Cassandra had managed to make a fool of him from one end of the valley to the other. It was clear that his second divorce was even more difficult than his first, and it showed a side of his life that was much more complicated than his calm, nature-loving public image. Through all of this, Annie remained quiet. She didn't give interviews about their marriage or try to tell her side of the story. She protected not just her own privacy, but also the memory of what she and John had shared during their good years together. Even as John struggled with his personal life and eventually died in that tragic plane crash in 1997, Annie kept her silence. But now, more than 40 years after their divorce and over 25 years after John's death, Annie is finally ready to share her memories. In recent interviews, she's opened up about what it was really like to be married to John Denver during the height of his fame. Annie talks about the good times with warmth and fondness. She remembers the man who wrote Annie's song in 10 minutes on a ski lift, the man who was so excited about adopting their children, the man who loved Colorado's mountains so much that he made them famous around the world. She remembers a John Denver who was kind, creative, and deeply passionate about the things he cared about. But she's also honest about the challenges. She talks about how difficult it was to watch someone she loved struggle under the pressure of fame. She explains how hard it was to maintain a normal family life when your husband is one of the most recognizable people in the world. She opens up about feeling like she lost the man she married to his career and his celebrity. One of the most touching things Annie has shared is how she feels about Annie's song today. She says that despite everything that happened between them, she's grateful that John wrote that song. It captures a moment in time when they were truly happy and in love. It's a beautiful piece of their history together that no amount of pain or anger can take away. Annie also talks about John as a father. She says that despite all their problems as a couple, John was a wonderful dad to Zachary and Anna Kate. He loved those children deeply, and they were truly the light of his life. Even after the divorce, John remained devoted to his kids, and Annie respected him for that. Looking back now, Annie can see their relationship more clearly. She understands that they were both very young when they got married, and they had no way of preparing for the kind of life that John's success would bring. She doesn't blame John for what happened, and she doesn't blame herself either. Sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the challenges that life throws at you. Annie has also shared her thoughts about John's tragic death in 1997. She was devastated when she heard about the plane crash. Despite their divorce, John was still the father of her children and a man she had loved deeply. His death was especially hard on Zachary and Anna Kate, who lost their father when they were still young. The plane crash that killed John Denver was a complicated tragedy. John was an experienced pilot, but on October 12, 1997, something went terribly wrong while he was flying his experimental aircraft. Investigators found that the fuel selector valve had been left in the wrong position, causing the engine to lose power. The plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean off the California coast. But the investigation also revealed that the aircraft itself had design flaws that weren't fully understood at the time. The fuel selector valve was positioned behind the pilot's seat, making it almost impossible to switch fuel tanks during flight. John had actually complained about this problem before the crash, but the issues were never properly fixed. Annie has said that John's death was a terrible waste. He was only 53 years old and still had so much music left in him. He was also working on environmental and humanitarian causes that were very important to him. His death robbed the world of not just a talented musician, but also a man who was trying to make a positive difference. In the years since John's death, Annie has watched as his music has continued to touch new generations of fans. Songs like Rocky Mountain High and Take Me Home, Country Roads are still played on radio stations around the world. Annie's song is still considered one of the most beautiful love songs ever written. Colorado even made Rocky Mountain High one of its official state songs, and West Virginia adopted Country Roads as one of theirs. Annie says it's amazing to see how John's music has lasted. She's proud that the songs he wrote continue to bring joy to people, and that his message of love for nature and peace continues to resonate. She knows that John would be happy to know that his music is still helping people feel connected to the beauty of the natural world. Today, Annie Denver lives a quiet life, far from the spotlight that once followed her because of her connection to John Denver. She's a grandmother now, and she focuses on her family and her own interests. She rarely gives interviews, and when she does, it's usually to honor John's memory or to share a message about something she believes in. But her decision to break her silence now feels important. For too long, the story of John Denver's personal life has been told by other people, by biographers, journalists, and fans who never really knew what went on behind closed doors. Annie's perspective gives us a more complete picture of who John Denver really was, both as an artist and as a man. Annie wants people to understand that John Denver was human. He wasn't just the smiling, nature-loving performer that people saw on stage. He was a complex person who struggled with the same things that many people struggle with. The pressure of work, the challenge of maintaining relationships, the difficulty of balancing personal happiness with professional success. She also wants people to know that despite everything that went wrong in their marriage, she doesn't regret loving John Denver. Their time together gave her 2 wonderful children and memories of some truly beautiful moments. The song Annie's Song will always be a testament to the love they shared, even if that love wasn't enough to last forever. Annie's story reminds us that behind every famous person is a real human being, with real relationships and real struggles. John Denver's music touched millions of people, but his personal life was just as complicated as anyone else's. The difference was that he had to live his complications in front of the whole world. As we listen to John Denver's music today, we can hear it with new understanding thanks to Annie's willingness to share her story. Annie's Song becomes even more beautiful when we know it came from a real moment of love between 2 people who were trying their best to build a life together. Rocky Mountain High takes on new meaning when we understand how important Colorado was to John and Annie's relationship. The story of Annie and John Denver is ultimately a human story. It's about love and loss, success and failure, dreams and reality. It's about 2 young people who fell in love and tried to make it work, even when the whole world was watching. It's about the price of fame and the challenge of staying true to yourself when everyone has expectations about who you should be. Annie Denver's decision to finally break her silence gives us a gift, the gift of understanding. We get to see John Denver not just as a famous singer, but as a real person who loved and was loved, who succeeded and failed, who brought joy to others while struggling with his own pain. Her story also reminds us to be gentle with our heroes. The people we admire are human beings with their own struggles and imperfections. That doesn't make their art any less beautiful or their achievements any less impressive. If anything, it makes them more relatable and their accomplishments more meaningful. So the next time you hear Annie's Song or Rocky Mountain High or any of John Denver's other beautiful songs, remember Annie's story. Remember that behind those songs were real people living real lives, trying their best to love each other and find happiness in a complicated world. And remember that sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the most human experiences, both the joyful ones and the painful ones. Annie Denver's courage in finally telling her story helps us understand not just John Denver the performer, but John Denver the man. And in doing so, she gives his music even more power to touch our hearts and remind us of what it means to be human. If this story touched you the way it touched us, please hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Share this video with anyone who loves John Denver's music, or who might be interested in this incredible untold story. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories about the real lives behind the music we love. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.